Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell. We are back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have massive recreation of Trump's birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein put on display in Washington, D.C. as DOJ continues to stall release of files from RadarOnline.com posted by The Way to Beauty. And yeah, personally, as long as it's in a public space, I think people should be able to display whatever they want to, including, Trump's birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein, or, if it's on a private property as well. So if it's someone's private property and they want to display whatever they feel like, I think they should be able to do that. With that being said, ultimately, people are going to justify putting up whatever they want to justify putting up. And yeah, personally, I don't know how long the state's going to let it stay up, and it might get you into trouble with the state if it's on your property. But regardless, ultimately, put up and fly whatever you feel like, or that's my thoughts on that issue. I think it's very much a libertarian perspective. Next we have study finds younger Trump voters pushing a harder cultural edge from Axios.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, "This is terrifying," and it looks like, it looks like the share of it's a chart. It says share of voters who say the average is the following statements. America needs more masculinity. 26% is the average. For the U.S. average, and 49% is the average among younger Trump voters. And it says surveys in November of 2025, 6,398 total U.S. voters, 1,044 were younger Trump voters born after 1981. And yeah, personally, as long as it's not enforced through the government, you could make the argument America does need more masculinity. But of course, Reddit, masculinity is fascism. Anything that's seen as outgroup at all is fascism. So that's my thoughts. So of course, Reddit's not going to like that. Next, we have Trump needs to act urgently to fix America, even if it means ignoring SCOTUS decisions. 23% is the U.S. average. 48% is the average among younger Trump voters. And yeah, of course, Reddit's gonna be against anything Trump does. So Reddit would be anti that. But if Trump wants to justify whatever he wants to justify, ultimately, a lot of people are going to defer what the president says, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next we have, it is more rebellious for a young person to be a religious than atheist. 28% is the U.S. average. 43% is the average among younger Trump voters. And I would agree with that. Atheism is very much the mainstream view in the secular society these days. But if you want to be atheist or religious, I think the libertarian position is be whatever you want to be, as long as you're not forcing it on anyone else. Next we have, the U.S. should bring more religion into government and public life, posted from the U.S. average is 28%, the younger Trump voter average is 40%, and of course, I'd be against the U.S. government pushing religion into public life, but the U.S. government's always going to be pushing some religion, I would say. When it comes to the woke stuff, the woke will say, oh, our stuff is just secular humanism when it comes to the government pushing LGBTQ or, civic history or the civic religion of the U.S. when it comes to the presidents and historical figures like MLK Jr. That's completely fine. But if it ever delves into actual Christianity, right, it thinks it's fascism. But the government. So that's why I think the libertarian position is the government shouldn't be pushing anything. But inherently, when you have government schools and other government institutions, the government's going to be inherently pushing things. And so I think the libertarian position is, we shouldn't have any government involved in ideological matters at all. So there should be no government schools and other government institutions in that regard. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, in a relationship, the man should lead and the woman should follow. U.S. average is 11%. The average among younger Trump voters was 26%. And yeah, personally, if people want to have a relationship like that, they should be able to. If they want to have it, the man and woman as co-equal partners, they should be able to. If they want to have the woman lead, they should be able to. Ultimately, everyone's relationship should be however they feel like. Next, we have, violence is sometimes needed to advance political cause in the U.S. 13% U.S. average, 20% among younger Trump voters. And yeah, of course, Reddit, they're going to be anti-violence unless, of course, the violence is on their side. It reminds me of the post I made to the Libertarian Party USA subreddit recently. I said, I think we all know the answer, but I might as well ask anyway. Why does Reddit hate guns when it's the McCloskeys or Kyle Rittenhouse, but love them when it's the Black Panthers? And I posted that and I said, The answer is because, like pretty much everything, Reddit seems to have no consistent values other than in-group good, out-group bad. It's also why it usually hates voter intimidation, but ignores that arguably one of the biggest cases of it in the U.S. so far, the century, has been done by, you guessed it, the Black Panthers. And I linked to the Wikipedia page for the new Black Panther Party voter intimidation case from the 2008 election. And then I said false, and and that's very much how it is. Like, the Reddit thinks this is the worst thing ever when it comes, since the younger Trump voters are saying, "Oh, violence is always needed to advance political causes." But when they advocate for violence against Republicans and MAGA, it's completely fine. It just goes to show you, they have no principles other than in group good, out group bad. Next, they have some races are naturally inferior to others. 11% is the U.S. average. 15% is the average among younger Trump voters. And yeah, if you want to believe some races are inferior to others, I think you should be able to do so, as long as you're not forcing that belief on anyone else. Next, we have Nick Fuentes is the public figure I agree with most about politics. 2% is the U.S. average. 6% is the average among younger Trump voters. And yeah, Nick Fuentes is just kind of a 4chan autistic troll. But of course, Reddit thinks he's literally the most influential person ever because no one can stop talking about him, and it just goes to show you that Reddit. They're very much gonna fearmonger over whoever the current thing is. I remember it used to be Milo Yiannopoulos, and soon it might be someone else. It's always very much the flavor of the month when it comes to who's the biggest boogeyman when it comes for Reddit. The only consistent is that Orange Man generally tends to be the biggest one for among them all, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And yeah, my thoughts on that post would be if people, if Reddit wants to fearmonger about younger Trump voters, they should be able to. But just because you fearmonger about something doesn't mean it's true. If you want to fearmonger about whatever you want to, you should be able to. But of course, Reddit, they're always going to fearmonger about Orange Man and his supporters rather than a lot of X you see more fearmonger about the Democrats, but ultimately, I think it's all just theater. Nothing ever really seems to happen. It's maybe sometimes something happens, like Charlie Kirk gets assassinated, but ultimately you take it day by day, and yeah, that's my thoughts there. Next, we have a full year of Trump and LGBTQ issues, all that's been lost from unclosetedmedia.com, posted by Knee Concussions, and they said, over the first year of Trump's second term, the White House announced a sweeping federal campaign against LGBTQ people, starting on Inauguration Day with two genders rhetoric, an executive order for unifying sex and aiming to erase federal recognition of trans identities, followed by rapid-fire rollbacks and deletion of LGBTQ/HIV resources across government websites. Many policy and funding hits directly affect health and safety, such as major cuts packaged from Trump's big beautiful bill that shut down the LGBTQ option on the 988 suicide hotline, and later moves to restrict coverage and reimbursement for gender affirming care. By late 2025 and into early 2026, we escalated into surveillance and punishment flavored actions such as subpoenas for minors' medical records, claims linking trans people to domestic terrorism, firings over pride symbols, and carceral policy rollbacks under the Prison Rape Elimination Act, closing with the Supreme Court say affecting trans ID rules, and the ICE killing of Renee Good that sparks protests. For full disclosure, this is my own work that I did with Uncloseted Media. I'm not here to ask for money or subscribers, but because the deaths of which have gone to attack a very small subset of the population will plug into our country into outright chaos or nothing short of appalling. Mass agents spearing people with no due process on the basis of their skin color. We're picking fights for neighbors and allies, and our government is attacking queer folks at every possible moment. And my thoughts on that are, if you want to think it's the worst time ever for LGBTQ people, I think you should be able to. But historically, it's just a backlash to how prominent it is in our culture these days, I would say. A lot of Redditors act like the U.S. is Uganda or Iran when it comes to LGBTQ people, and like you get the death penalty if you're LGBTQ. But regardless, it's just very much a culture war distraction from the fact that the two parties agree on pretty much everything, despite how Reddit and legacy media and pretty much everyone on social media, for that matter, will have you believe that there's these two vastly different parties. In reality, they agree on pretty much everything, and they just use wedge issues like immigration or abortion or LGBTQ to divide people, and that's very much the purpose of the culture war, I would say. Next, we have Miami Beach police question of activists over a Facebook post that criticized Republican Mayor Stephen Minor. posted by Tom14, and that's cross-post from the Public Freakout subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't think police should be going to your home over what you post on Facebook or any other social media for that matter, but ultimately, they can justify doing whatever they justify since they have the legal monopoly of force from the state on their side. And oftentimes, there's nothing you can do about it since, the state controls the courts and the government and the legal system as well. Next, we have to make this woman a criminal, posted by Ragnarok XG, and that's cross-post from there was an attempt subreddit, and it's a link from a CNN article. It's here to a CNN article. CNN text messages and moved SUV. How the government's case against a Chicago woman shot by a border patrol agent fell apart. And then there's some text under there. A Chicago woman who was shot 5 times by Trump's Border Patrol and then charged as a terrorist had every charge dropped. Agents swore she pulled a gun and rammed them. The video showed the opposite. They hit her first, and her gun never left the holster. The federal government didn't stop a threat. It invented one, shot an innocent woman, and lied to cover it. And yeah, that just goes to show you that, the government can justify attacking you for whatever reason, and even if just because they have legal monopoly of force on their side, they might be more justified than others in some instances. But just because that's the case doesn't mean you should be justifying everything they do. And yeah, it's very much why I think law enforcement should be private rather than public. Because if it was private, at the very least, it wouldn't have the legal monopoly in these forces and could fight back if they ever do go after you, and that's my thoughts there. Next, we have off-duty police report being targeted by ICE, papers, please, civil rights violations if they have wrong skin color, voiced by CH4Locks, that's cross-post from the law subreddit, and that post says, Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Burley, we're hearing people have being stopped with no cause and being demanded to show paperwork to determine if they're here illegally. We started hearing from our police officers the same complaints. Every one of these individuals is a person of color, and I guess that's a clip of him saying that out in News Nation. And yeah, if people want to stop you aside and demand your papers, ultimately they have legal opportunities to do so. I personally don't care for it. It's like I don't care for it when it came to COVID, and sometimes government agents demanded to see vaccine papers, but regardless, ultimately the government can force you to do whatever they want to, especially their foot soldiers and the police and other law enforcement agencies like ICE, and oftentimes, there's nothing you can do about it since they have the legal monopoly use of force, and it can be deadly if you ever disobey them. Even if you do comply like Daniel Shaver, they still might kill you. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have this post is unironically tagged anti-fascist. When the AF died, just see, posted by Nietzsche, and that's cross-post from the socialism subreddit, and that's entitled "Comrade Mao was way better than Abe." And it's a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and then next to the picture of Abraham Lincoln, it says, "Freedom to slaves determined second-class citizens, segregated people with fewer rights than white Americans." And it's a picture of Mao Zedong, and then it says, "Freed the slaves and gave them full citizenship with the same rights as all the other Chinese citizens." And that's very much how Reddit works, I personally don't really care for Lincoln. I think he was kind of tyrannical when it came to his use of government authoritarianism, even if, a lot of Redditors say, it was justified since there's a civil war going on. But regardless, Reddit is, of course, going to always simp for Mao or Lenin or the other communist figures, even if they led to deadly regimes that killed hundreds of thousands. It just goes to show you that, Reddit has no principles other than in-group good, out-group bad. And, ultimately, if you want to support Mao or Stalin or Lenin or any other communist or revolutionary, I think you should be able to. But just because you support them doesn't mean that what they did was right. Just like, a lot of the U.S. public supports Abraham Lincoln, that doesn't mean what his government authoritarianism was right. And it just goes to show you that, just because the consensus agrees on something doesn't necessarily make it right. That's very much how, it's an argument against democracy is forced collectivism and mob rule. It's like a gang rape. When a gang rape and the majority of people agree it's going on, but, and it's very much like that. It's very much like, and in a lot of ways, Reddit says, democracy is the most sacred thing, but then they complain about democratically elected leader Donald Trump every day. It just goes to show you they have no principles other than in-group good, out-group bad. And in a lot of ways, I would say Donald Trump might be just the best argument against democracy. After all the baggage he had, he still got elected in 2024. And with the majority of with the plurality of the popular vote, I should say. And it just goes to show you that, people are going to vote for whatever they want to vote for, and even if it's an objectively bad choice. And that just goes to show you that, it doesn't really matter whatever people think, that's very much why we should argue. But libertarian position should be to be against democracy, or to be as a form of forced collectivism. Instead, we should support voluntary collectivism, and that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Free Speech, Not in Conservative America, posted by CH4Locks, and that's crossfits from the March Against Nazis subreddit, and that's the truth from, that was entitled The Fascist Pedophile Wannabe Dictator That Thinks He Has the Authority to Security on Salon TV, LOL. And that's the truth from Donald Trump. The Army-Navy game is one of our greatest American traditions, unmatched patriotism, courage, and honor. This incredible tradition is not at risk of being pushed aside by more college playoff games and big TV money, not anymore. Under my administration, the second Saturday in December belongs to the Army-Navy, and again, only the Army-Navy. I'll soon sign an historic executive order securing an exclusive 4-hour broadcast window so the national event can stand above commercial postseason games. No other team or gamer team can violate this time slot. And yeah, personally, I think that goes very much against libertarianism. If he wants to have the Army Navy game always be on the second Saturday in December, I think that's fine. But if they want to play other college football games during that broadcast window, I think they should be able to. Even if they're playoff games or non-playoff games or just regular bowl games, just play games wherever you want and have broadcast them whatever you want. The government shouldn't be telling you what you can and can't broadcast. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Trump stealing women's trophy, posted by Mundane Image 13, and that's a quote from Donald Trump. The United States will not let men steal trophies from women, and I guess that was a quote, a speech of his, and then it's a picture of him, taking the Nobel Peace Prize away from the Venezuelan woman who just won, I think Maria Cortez Machado or something like that. And yeah, it just goes to show you that, Trump has no principles other than give me all the trophies. I personally would probably agree with him in his argument more that, men shouldn't be stealing trophies from women, biological males shouldn't be competing in biologically female sports. But, it just goes to show you that, Trump just doesn't care about anything other than really himself. He might say, I'm against trans women competing in women's sports, but that's not a principled stance of his. It's just one that he thinks is going to benefit himself, and that's very much where Trump's ideology rests. It's like that one scene from The Simpsons where Bart's banging in the cooking pots. And he says, "I'm so great, I'm so great." And, that's very much what Trump's ideology is. It's just I'm great, and he'll justify whatever he wants to justify in order to prove how great he is. And that's not something I personally care for. But ultimately, he's managed to make it this far. So ultimately, I guess people do care for that. As I said earlier, that's probably one of the greatest arguments against democracy you could have. Next, we have FIFA on alert after 17,000 fans canceled World Cup tickets in one night from MSN.com, posted by The Way to Beauty. And yeah, if people want to cancel the World Cup tickets, I think that's fine. I think the World Cup's still going to sell out anyway, regardless of how much Reddit thinks it's going to fail, because the orange man's in power. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Trump administration claims offshore wind poses a threat, but it won't say how. No one seems to know what sort of threats it has found. It's been unwilling to release that information, even to the companies building the projects. It's no secret that the president has a personal animus toward wind farms. From NPR.org, posted by CH4Locks, and that's cross-post from the energy subreddit. And yeah, I like how Reddit says, don't trust anything the government's doing, yet they still are citing government sources like NPR. It just goes to show you no principles other than in-group, good, out-group, bad. But regardless, if Trump wants to be against wind farms, I think he should be able to. I think the libertarian position is energy should be privately funded rather than publicly funded. Ultimately, when energy is publicly funded, it's subject to the ones who's ever in power. And right now, that's Donald Trump. Maybe the next president will be anti-nuclear, even though nuclear power is generally effective outside of when it explodes, like Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island. But regardless, ultimately, I think libertarian position is, energy should be whatever you want it to be, as long as you build it on your own private property. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have not enough people care about where the majority of their taxes actually go. Only those yucky poor people get assistance. This is by CH4Locks. That's cross-post from the Workform subreddit. And they added, and the hell of that post is, I wouldn't object to paying taxes if taxes paid for what we should care about. And that looks like a tweet or Facebook post from Washington State Means, who just said, just my taxes layout: Israel $1,281, ICE $742, Argentina $311, Ballroom $239.47 for poor people. And yeah, but that's personally why I think libertarian position should be for voluntary taxation rather than forced taxation like we have currently. If you want to earmark your money for Israel, ICE, Argentina, the new White House Ballroom, or poor people, I think you should be able to. But right now, what we have is forced taxation, where you don't get to determine where your taxes go to, and this is very much the result of that. Next, we have U.S. citizen says ICE took him at gunpoint in only underwear despite frigid cold and no warrant from APnews.com, posted by Ever Credence. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that, but as I stated previously, the government has legal obligations to force justify doing whatever it feels like, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have driving into Reedsville and saw this, posted by ExpertSwan8267, and that's a picture of looks like a political candidate who's endorsed by the NRA, and then someone posted a sign on top of that. Attention gun owners, this ad is a lie. This man the NRA did not endorse Berger. And they added, look to the backstory and don't have a dog in this fight, but kind of crazy how brash politicians are claiming the NRA endorsement when they don't have it. And yeah, that's just goes to show you that, politicians can say whatever they feel like, oftentimes without consequence. This guy can put up a billboard saying he's NRA endorsed. But, and, ultimately, if someone didn't put up that other thing, people would think he's NRA endorsed. But, it just goes to show you that, politicians are very much, politics is very much the art of false advertising. And that's very much why I think a libertarian should be against it. One of the biggest reasons. There's tons of reasons libertarians should be against forced collectivist politics, I would say. Next, we have Say It Louder, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's crossword from the Newsom Massacre subreddit, and it's entitled Why Due Process Matters, and that's a tweet from Ronald Klein, who tweeted, if Trump can deny due process to those allegedly here unlawfully, ICE can grab you, allege you are an assistant, and deport you without a hearing. To everyone who's tweeted back, not me, I can prove an assistant, you missed the point, without due process, who will you prove it to? Where will you show your proof? A right to a hearing, judicial review protects all of us. And I guess I would agree with that. Ultimately the government can justify deporting anyone for whatever reasons they feel like, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have ICE says officers can forcibly enter homes during immigration operations without judicial warrant. 2025 memo from NBCNews.com, posted by CH4Locks, and that's crosspost from the Moderate Politics subreddit. And personally, I don't really care for that, but the Fourth Amendment was long since been dead, especially since the Patriot Act kind of really took it down a level, or nerfed it, as some people would say. But regardless, ultimately the Constitution and Bill of Rights have been dead in a while for forever now, pretty much, and. Ultimately, there's nothing you can do about it. The government can say, "Oh, we swore an oath to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights," but ultimately they can always have found a way around them whenever possible, especially in the post-World War II era, I would say. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have breaking. Regime forces are using chemical weapons on innocent peaceful protesters, posted by Row Run Row, and that looks like ICE or maybe some other government agency pepper spraying a woman. And yeah, is it a woman or might be a man? I don't know. I can't really seem to tell what gender that is, or maybe I don't know. Maybe they're a woke person who identifies as some other gender. I don't know. But regardless, it just goes to show you that the government can justify spraying whatever they want on you as long as you're in their way. And that's personally why I try and avoid law enforcement, police, and other law enforcement officers as much as reasonably possible, because ultimately if they have legal obligations for force to justify doing whatever they feel like against you. And I think that's very much why I think Redditors they always say, oh, we got to protest and stand up against these guys. But I think libertarian positions, you might as well just avoid them. You don't want to get into unnecessary trouble, and getting involved with them is just only going to lead to unnecessary trouble, I would say. Next, we have Democrats are still a working party, posted by Impassionata, and they link to a post from the Murder by AOC subreddit. AOC on Trump's DeVos performance. Our global partners see the result of not just one man, but the entire government apparatus, and a party that is willing to watch someone decompensate in front of the world and do nothing about it. And then the OP added, the other party is a total loss. Trumpism is fascism. Tolerating the stupidity is stupidity. And yeah, personally, if they want to support the Democrats, they should be able to. But, Reddit, they don't really care about anything other than what letter the politicians have next to their name, whether it's D or R. In reality, the two parties are much more alike than they are different. And despite how Reddit and social media and legacy media and pretty much everyone tries to gaslight you to make you otherwise, they'll pretty much always justify the same stuff when they take power. Reddit would think if Kamala did all the same stuff that Trump does, maybe she wouldn't be as aggressive when it came to something like Greenland. But she'd still do the coup in Venezuela or push for regime change in Iran. It just goes to show you that Reddit would think that only thinks she'd be being a girl boss and slaying. But since the Orange Man does pretty much the same stuff, it's the worst thing ever. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have ICE detains 5-year-old Columbia Heights boy, sends him to Texas, listed by Stage 4 locks, and that's crosspost from the Twin Cities subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't think that's correct. Reddit might be, there might be some context missing here, because Reddit's always puts narrative over context, I would say. But regardless, ultimately, if the ICE wants to justify doing whatever it feels like and detaining you, however your age, whether you be 5 or 105, they should ultimately they have the legal opinion support to justify that, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And I think we're gonna see if there's anything. There's nothing. We're gonna wrap up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.